At a time when the world leaders have called for calmer discourse and less inflammatory hyperbole, our national broadcaster has published a truly extraordinary documentary on Donald Trump. It was called Retribution, and here's how it starts.
I am your warrior, I am your justice, and for those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution, I am your retribution.
That's almost what I call gangster-type politics. The politics of retribution, politics of revenge.
Their reign is over. Their reign will be over.
Mr. Trump has practiced the big lie for 5 decades, and it works for him.
I actually think we won most of the country.
He represents a dark force in humanity.
You can see where they're going with that, but issues with tone aside, there are also issues with how facts are presented by journalist Mark Willacy. Now, the major issue is an attempt to attribute the policy of a conservative think tank with Donald Trump's policy platform.
There's even a 920-page publicly available playbook outlining plans to transform the presidency, including to give Donald Trump unprecedented reach to take on his political enemies.
This book, this agenda, the entire Project 2025 is a plan to unite the conservative movement and the American people against elite rule and woke culture warriors.
Project 2025 accuses this ruling class of faceless civil servants and unelected mandarins of thwarting Donald Trump's first-term agenda. To the former president, it's a cancer in the heart of American government that he calls the deep state.
And this.
From being a supporter and a mouthpiece for Donald Trump, Anthony Scaramucci is now one of his fiercest and most outspoken critics. He believes Project 2025, with its plan to stack the public service with an army of Trump loyalists, will propel America into a dystopian future.
Willacy also wrote this article, The Plan for Power. If Donald Trump is returned to power by American voters this November, he'll have an army at his disposal, at least 10,000 people recruited to help implement his controversial agenda. Now, Willacy stated this claim with authority. He stated this as a fact it would happen. But Trump has repeatedly disavowed the plan. And watch how Trump's senior campaign advisor, Chris LaCivita, responded when asked by a Politico journalist whether Project 2025 was actually Trump's plan.
That's pure speculation on your part. It's complete and utter bullshit for any reporter to write that this is the way it is, because it's not. That's what the left wants, but I'm not going to give in to that. And Susie's not going to give into it, and the president's made it clear. These people do not speak for him. They do not speak for the campaign. And I love the fact
you call them grifters. You call them grifters.
The campaign, the campaign.
What do you mean?
The campaign. Well, yeah.
The
grifters. The campaign is 100% focused on. We're the ones that are putting out the policy.
They're hurting your campaign. You think?
Look, I think that in the perfect world, from their perspective, they would love to drive the issue set. But they don't get to do that. Now, you guys sure as hell give them a lot of leeway, because you're always writing the Trump campaign is going to start with the next Trump.
They're hurting your campaign.
The next Trump.
They're jamming you.
No, they're a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And you had to read nearly 30 paragraphs into Willacy's article on this to get a quote from Trump which completely dispels the entire premise of his work. Some of the things they are saying are absolutely ridiculous and abysmal. Anything they do, I wish them luck, but I have nothing to do with them, he wrote. Now, it's completely fine to criticise Trump, and all politicians should be scrutinised, but criticise him for the policies he is actually bringing to the table. Now, activists who are masquerading as journalists know what they are doing. If you are going to state that Trump will raise a conservative army, and your evidence for that is a policy which Trump doesn't endorse, you should put his quote immediately after the claim. That's just basic stuff. And Willacy committed another journalistic sin. He deceptively edited a clip to make it look like Trump was calling for a violent bloodbath if he lost the next election. Now, it's a Democrat talking point and something that Biden also said during the last debate.
Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the country.
I do worry there's a real group of American citizens who are willing to engage in violence for Donald Trump.
But what the ABC didn't tell you is that this is the full version where Trump is making it clear that he's talking about an economic bloodbath from job losses.
Put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath.
Well, joining me on the show this week is Sky News contributor Louise Roberts and the Australian's Darren Davidson. Darren, let's start with, there's a few things to unpack here. First of all, the ABC attempting to attribute a think tank's policy to a person that has said repeatedly they don't endorse it. It would be like the ABC saying, well, the IPA has this policy. These people have links to Peter Dutton. Therefore, this is Peter Dutton's policy. It is such a leap and such sloppy journalism. I cannot believe it aired.
It's really dishonest editing, and they should be pulled up on it. And you're dead right to scrutinise it. I think the other thing about the programme was the timing. It came the day after the assassination attempt. There was a clear attempt by US media and other media outlets around the world to just tone it down a little bit and take the heat out of the presidential debate.
Not from these guys.
But no, they just waded in with this really inflammatory programme that's not only dishonest, but seeks to actually turn the heat up and set viewers on a kind of aggressive course towards Trump. Even Trump himself is trying to turn the heat down. And he hasn't been attacking Biden. Apparently he's not even going to mention him in the RNC speech, which will have aired by the time we go to air on Friday evening. And so it just shows that the ABC are not only dishonest in their editing, but they're really outstep with what's happening in the media. And you know, they had 24 hours to change the programming schedule and pull that program, but they didn't. It's very disappointing.
Yeah, and Louise, the bloodbath stuff is quite extraordinary. That's actually had some adverse fact checks by the people that are not fans of Trump, and they say that this is actually missing context because he's talking about car manufacturing and the bloodbath. And yes, there is the rhetoric there, and he's being very Trumpy, but them taking that and to make that look like he is in some universe talking about political violence, I find that egregious.
Oh, and also all the irony, as Darren said, you know, less than 48 hours after someone's tried to murder, let's face it, the next President Trump, they're producing and broadcasting a show which says that he's going to be responsible for inciting this sort of political violence and the destruction of democracy. They say that's his mission, to blow up democracy in the US, which is crazy. And you have to wonder whether this show was actually run past someone very high up in the Democratic Party for approval before it actually went to air. It is so biased against Trump and, you know, as Darren says, so devoid of many critical facts.
Yeah, and I think you both touch on such a great point. Yes, I agree. There's a lot of Democratic talking points in there which should make any journalist really pause if you're just regurgitating one side of politics talking points when it's wrong. But also the fact that Anthony Albanese has called for calm. He's called for a calmer discourse. President Joe Biden has. Nearly every world leader has looked at this at a time that America is at this tension point. And then our taxpayer dollars are still describing him as a threat to democracy and raising that rhetoric in a way that's, one, there's errors in there, which is just egregious, but a way that's also irresponsible.
It is really irresponsible. I mean, we saw even the most sympathetic US broadcasters, MSNBC, CNN, tone down the rhetoric, seek to turn down the heat. But no, not our friends at the ABC.
Yeah, well said. Well, major breaking news events are tough to cover, but at what point does caution become speculation? Many of the biggest newsrooms in the world have been criticised after publishing watered down or just simply inaccurate versions of events in the minutes following the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. CNN ran with Trump's speech interrupted by Secret Service. Well, no, it wasn't interrupted by the Secret Service, so that line is actually false. The abundance of caution led to a false narrative being published. Then we have this from the Washington Post. Trump taken away right after loud noise at rally. And then this headline by USA Today, Trump removed from stage by Secret Service after loud noises startles president. and arguably the worst early coverage of all. Secret Service rushes Trump off stage after he falls at rally. Now, it made it sound like he slipped and that Trump was to blame for the incident. And of course, journalists should only ever publish what is confirmed. But these headlines are worded extremely poorly. There was a way to cover the story without inserting assumptions, which later turned out to be false. You could have led with major incident at Donald Trump rally as Secret Service rushed to protect former president. That should have been the early headline before it was confirmed a shooter had fired, because these newsrooms all had access to this footage.
Take a look at what happened.
Any reasonable person watching that live stream should have known immediately that Trump did not just fall. He was clearly attacked and the Secret Service clearly rushed to protect him. Now, the Washington Post, which was responsible for one of those headlines, attempted to defend itself as simply waiting for facts. Breaking stories, of course, require the kind of caution that USA Today displayed. Not all of the central facts had yet been confirmed by authorities at the time the article was first posted. Now, the problem is that USA Today did publish unconfirmed facts. It claimed that the incident was just Trump being startled. That was pure speculation, and it turned out to be false. You can't publish fake news and then say the reason for publishing fake news is your commitment to accuracy. Louise, obviously, it's a very difficult event to cover. But I think it's kind of, it's like a Rorschach test. You're looking at this, and if you are in the CNN newsroom or in a newsroom that is adversarial to Trump and quite hostile to him, you're seeing what you want to see. And I feel like that is why some of these headlines have been produced.
I agree, and sometimes I wonder when I see that coverage if we were actually watching the same footage, because it's clearly he feels his life is under threat, as it was. The people behind him all duck for cover. The Secret Service clamour around him. So how could you suggest that it was anything about a fall or anything that somehow Trump himself was to blame for what happened? It's just crazy.
Completely agree. Darren?
I think that the thing that it showed is that the Secret Service failed to protect him, which is another sign that the Biden administration is kind of sort of badly adrift and has lost its way. And I think that's that's part of the reason why people struggle to actually confirm what they could see with their own eyes, because it doesn't say a lot that's very positive about the Biden administration.
Well, now let's move on, because Biden is facing plenty of pressure to step aside, including by those at CNN of all places. CNN's Van Jones weighs into the news Joe Biden was sick with COVID, and his analysis was scathing.
A bullet couldn't stop Trump. A virus just stopped Biden. You've got the nominees of this party getting their butts kissed. Biden's getting his butt kicked by his own party. The Democrats are coming apart. The Republicans are coming together.
But some journalists were still blindly barracking for Biden, and it was actually pretty sad and pathetic. The worst were at MSNBC, and this clip has actually gone pretty viral for how absurd it is. Take a look.
Question that I have on that. These two men are both elderly. Donald Trump is an elderly man who, for whatever reason, was given 9 seconds to take a iconic photo op during an active shooter situation. Weird situation. We'll figure that out one day. But his survival of that and bouncing right back and going right to his convention is being conveyed in the media world as a sign of strength. This current president of the United States is 81 years old and has COVID. Should he be fine in a couple of days? Doesn't that convey exactly the same thing? That he's strong enough, older than Trump, to have gotten something that used to really be fatal to people his age. So if he does fine out of it and comes back and is able to do rallies, isn't that exactly the same?
Well, Louise, the attempt to suggest that getting COVID is somewhat comparable to getting shot in the head. No. Does she have a good point?
No, not at all, not at all. But isn't it heartening to see that the left side are actually coming into the realm of reality that he's not fit to run for president at all? They've finally
I wonder, is a bit of it an overcorrection? On CNN, it's very, very doggedly anti-Biden. And the cynic in me wonders, are they just doing that because they've realised it's not advantageous anymore for this candidate?
Well, possibly they're losing viewers in droves who are thinking, what on earth are you talking about? We can see that the latest results I've seen today have Democrats 61% are not in favour of him running. That'll only escalate over the weekend, of course, and we're seeing now a strategy in play. If he's got COVID, and then a doctor will say, well, perhaps you shouldn't probably run in this campaign.
I think you're right. I can't see him running at this stage. He can barely get into a car, and there's this footage where he's not wearing a mask, by the way, and he's walking around. He can't actually even get himself into a car. There's people lifting up his legs. What do you think?
Well, I think, this shows that Washington Democrats are absolutely ruthless when they're faced with a loss of power. You can understand why Biden resents this brutal turn on him by his own party and his boosters in the media, because they've been absolutely complicit in persuading him to run for a second term, and now they're turning on him. But, there's a clear cognitive decline, not just over the last couple of years, but probably the last few weeks. I mean, that television interview that everyone's forgotten about now because it's been overtaken by events that he did in the US last Monday morning didn't reassure anybody after that disastrous debate. And I think the thing now after the assassination, if you're a Democrat strategist, you're going to know that what that assassination attempt will do is ensure that every single Trump voter will now turn out.
That's a really good point. It will galvanise.
Rate will be incredibly high. They won't get the same participation rates, so they have to make a change. But the other thing is Biden's family members need to stop persuading him to run as well. But as I said, you can sympathise a little bit with him because Pelosi, Schumer, Jeffries, Obama, all of these people who were complicit in that second term are now turning on him. So you can see why he's angry about that and finds it. But he must recognise his own cognitive decline.
Well said. He still has Jill backing him in, though, doesn't she?
Yeah. I wonder why, though. Let's move on, though, because when Democrats and their friends in the media finally started admitting that the president had cognitive issues, it was also the admission that they had lied for years about his health. And it always confused me how the entire White House press group, with a few exceptions, fell for this lie. That is until I heard White House press sec Karine Jean-Pierre this week praise Kelly O'Donnell, the head of the White House Correspondents Association.
It has been a joy, and I've had the opportunity to know you for some time.
Well, that's fine, I guess. You can have a professionally adversarial relationship and still have a sort of kinship. It isn't as if Kelly personally mentored the press sec while she was being lied to about the president's health for years, because that would be crazy and that would definitely be too close a relationship.
And I really appreciated more personally your guidance, your mentorship in tough times. And so thank you so much, Kelly.
Louise, the press sec, whose job, by the way, is to give information, and the journalist's job is to say, is that truth? Is that propaganda? Push back. The press sec has been mentored by the head journalist of that group, and she's openly saying, thank you for mentoring me behind closed doors. It's not appropriate.
No, totally inappropriate. Can you imagine it happening here in Canberra, for example? Albanese saying to one of the press gallery, thanks very much for those tips before I got up and made this speech today. It'd be absolute uproar. But that seems, apart from you picking it up, that seems to have passed without notice, that no one's even sort of
I haven't seen it. I love watching these things, though, Darren, and that, to me, I just stopped when I saw that, because that, to me, would suggest that there is this friendship, and we know they're all mates. But to say that she's giving her this mentorship, teaching her how to be evasive and to dodge questions, I think that is everything that's been wrong with that press group over the last couple of years. Yeah, no, it's a great pickup by you. I think very few in the media have noticed that line. It's poacher turned gamekeeper. They shouldn't be playing that role. And she, there's been questions about her competence for years. She relies on this big binder of documents, can't even provide the most basic information and answer questions. And I think that just, signals, as you say, the collusion between the press gallery there and the sympathisers that they have in the media. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.